The room was crowded, walls closing in with every burst of laughter and clink of glass. I stood by the doorway, fingers curled tightly around the small box I brought. It was nothing extravagant, just a slideshow I'd spent hours putting together. Pictures of all of us growing up, set to a soft piano melody I'd edited in late at night when the silence of my apartment felt louder than ever. No one asked what it was. No one even noticed I was holding it. Still stuck behind a screen in some storage room? My brother Mason shouted across the room. The way his words landed, half joke, half jab, burned more than I cared to admit. Someone laughed. I didn't see who. I just kept smiling, the way I've trained myself to. Smile, stay quiet, and never give them the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. Uncle Bill chimed in, loud and tipsy. What does she even do? Click-clack on a keyboard for the army? More laughter. I felt it roll through the room like a wave, leaving me stranded and small. My mom stood by the kitchen, sipping her wine, her voice low but not low enough. We just wish she had something to show for her life, she said to my aunt. Tessa was always so smart. We really thought she'd be a doctor or something real. The words slid beneath my skin like broken glass. I looked down at my navy blue dress, suddenly hyper-aware of how plain it was. I hadn't even been offered a chair. And maybe that was fitting. There was no space for me here, except maybe by the door. Then the TV above the fireplace flickered. At first, I thought it was part of the cheesy holiday movie someone had put on, but the screen turned black. A second later, white text appeared across a red background. Emergency broadcast from the Department of Homeland Security. Conversation stopped. The kids hushed. A map appeared, pulsing red zones on the east and west coast. A man in uniform appeared, dead serious. My stomach dropped. My hands tightened around the box until I heard the ribbon start to tear. I couldn't move. This must be some sort of drill, my aunt muttered. But I couldn't look away. I knew that voice. I knew that map. I knew exactly what this was. Behind me, my dad poured another drink. Just once, he muttered. I wish you'd make us proud. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I was too busy keeping my breathing steady. Too busy swallowing the fire rising in my throat. Because what they didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to ask, is that the moment they were watching unfold on the screen, I had already lived it. And the rest of the world was about to find out. 2 years earlier, I lived in a world no one at that family party could ever imagine. I was stationed in Germany, embedded with a covert cybersecurity unit tucked inside a dull-looking building outside Ramstein Air Base. On paper, we were just analysts. In reality, we were the firewall between foreign state hackers and critical U.S. infrastructure. I barely slept back then. Not because of the workload, but because of what we were watching unfold. It started with strange traffic, encrypted pings bouncing off servers that shouldn't exist. I remember staring at the screen for hours, the patterns repeating like a song only I could hear. My supervisor brushed it off. Just background noise, he said, but I knew better. I saw something layered deep in the code, an instruction set, buried in obfuscation, pointing toward a potential breach during a high-level diplomatic summit scheduled in Vienna. I escalated it. Twice. No response. Then, the night before the summit, our system went dark. Everything. Shut down. No comms, no feed. Just static. My team panicked. Some started wiping drives, others assumed it was just a drill. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just an outage. It was cover. So I broke protocol. I stayed behind while the others evacuated per emergency orders. In that eerie silence, I manually rerouted one of our isolated terminals, decrypted the last partial transmission, and found it. Targeted malware with enough reach to take down our eastern power grid. It was elegant, fast, invisible to most detection protocols. I recorded a voice message for command on the emergency frequency, something we were only supposed to use if our lives were at risk. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. This is Operator 917. I've isolated the threat vector. Estimated deployment, 12 hours. My coordinates are compromised. This file contains the route. Please act. I attached the decrypted file and hit send. Then I sat there, alone, waiting. No one responded. Not that night. Not the next day. When our systems came back online, we were told to destroy any unsanctioned copies and clear our drives. 3 days later, a medal showed up at my door in a plain brown envelope. No name, no ceremony, just a folded note. For distinguished action during Operation Greystone. That was it. They made me sign a silence clause and return to my normal post. Every time I asked what had happened to the message, I was told it had been archived. I don't know what hurt more, being erased from the history I helped shape, or realizing no one would ever know I existed in it. But I moved on. Or at least I pretended to. Until now. Because as that emergency broadcast played in my family's living room, I realized the ghosts I'd buried in Germany weren't dead. They were coming back to life. After Germany, I returned home to silence. No parades, no plaques. Just a small, unremarkable desk inside a secure federal building. My badge still scanned green, but my work felt ghosted. I was given vague monitoring tasks and access to level 4 data, but no one looked me in the eye anymore. I lived in a quiet apartment above a coffee shop. No roommates, no visitors. Some days, the only voices I heard were the ones from security briefings I wasn't even allowed to question. My mother called occasionally, usually to ask why I hadn't gotten serious about my future. My father told me maybe it was time to go back to school, get a real degree. They had no idea what I had already given up for this country. I tried reaching out to my sister Claire. We used to be close, at least before the mission. I asked her to dinner one night. She texted back, "Sorry, have plans with people from the firm. Next time?" There wasn't a next time. At a restaurant one weekend, Mason invited me out with some of his friends. Halfway through the meal, the waiter placed the check in front of me and said, "Thanks for your service," like I was the help. Mason didn't even correct him. I laughed it off, pretending not to notice. But when I got to my car, I sat behind the wheel, hands frozen on the steering column, and cried until my chest ached. I didn't want medals. I just wanted to be seen. One Saturday, I visited the base memorial wall. It was quiet, wind brushing the stone. I knelt down, placed a single white flower beneath a plaque that read, "Lieutenant Aaron Delgado, Operation Greystone, died in silence so others could live loud." He'd been part of my team, one of the few who believed me that night in Germany. He didn't make it out when the systems went down. "I still remember," I whispered. "You knew what it cost. We did it. You mattered." I stood up, wiping my eyes. The world had moved on. My family had labeled me a disappointment, and I had accepted that, quietly. But deep down, I knew something they didn't. The worst kind of invisibility is not when strangers overlook you. It's when the people who should know you choose not to. Still, I stayed silent until the call came. It was nearly midnight when the secured line rang. Not my cell phone, not my work number. The encrypted landline buried behind my couch, the one I'd almost forgotten how to answer. I stared at it as it rang again. My heart stuttered. That line wasn't supposed to ring. Not unless... I picked it up. "This is Monroe." There was a pause. Then, "Tessa Monroe? This is DHS. We need your voice file. The one from May 17th, 2 years ago. Operation Greystone." My blood ran cold. "You told me it was destroyed." "It wasn't." I stood up, pacing. My mind raced. What's going on? "There's an active infiltration," the voice said. "Pattern matches your original anomaly. Same signature, same structure. We're already seeing system spikes. If it propagates, we lose primary defense net integrity within 12 hours. I didn't hesitate. I still have the file, the original, and the mirrored route I traced. Silence on the other end. Then the voice returned, lower now. "We need your help, specialist, but this is above the desk level. We'll need you here." A strange calm settled over me. "I'm not sending it unless I'm there to walk you through it," I said. "You don't have time to make the same mistakes again." Another pause. Then, "Pack your uniform. You're coming to DC." They sent a black transport at dawn. I left a sticky note on my apartment door for the mailman, canceled a dentist appointment, and slipped my dog-eared copy of Code, red lines into my backpack, just in case I needed to breathe. No one in my family knew I was gone. Not that they would have asked. On the plane, I watched the sunrise pour gold across the clouds. Below me, the country buzzed, unaware of the danger ticking through its digital veins. I wasn't afraid this time. Not of the breach. Not of failure. Not even of being forgotten again. Because now they were calling me not to bury the past, but to dig it up and stop it from happening again. And this time, they'd hear my voice. Every single word. The uniform felt heavier than I remembered. Stiff collar, tight sleeves, polished nameplate catching the fluorescent light. I adjusted the barrette in my hair and looked at myself in the mirror before stepping off the transport. 2 years had passed, but the woman staring back at me looked sharper than she had that night in Germany. Harder. Clearer. At the Pentagon entrance, security scanned my ID and paused. Then the soldier looked up. He stiffened. "Ma'am, welcome back." His voice carried a respect I wasn't used to hearing. Not anymore. I nodded, silently. They rushed me through secure corridors, flashing lights, hurried footsteps, murmurs of activity like waves crashing into walls. Inside the Situation Room, the air was taut, almost brittle. Screens lined the walls, data streams flying across them like lightning. The Joint Chiefs were present, eyes tired, brows furrowed, coffee cups clutched tight. And then they played it. My voice. It echoed through the room, exactly as I'd recorded it in that cold bunker in Germany. Calm, focused. "This is Operator 917. I've isolated the threat vector. Estimated deployment 12 hours. No one spoke. No one interrupted. My words painted the map. My instructions outlined the breach. My voice, once ignored, was now the lifeline holding together national defense. I pointed to the red line traces on the screen. It's mutating, but the core structure's the same. They're hiding their packet transmission inside weather feed injections. If we isolate the thermal jumps here, I circled a point on the map, we can pin the breach origin. A technician tested my theory. Results confirmed it. The room moved fast after that. Commands flew. Firewalls closed. Code was injected into defense servers in real time. By hour's end, we'd cornered the digital ghost. One of the generals leaned close, watching the data stabilize. "It's working. You stopped it." I sat back in the chair, chest heaving. It was over. I hadn't realized my hands were shaking. The general placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saved us. Twice." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. No tears. Not here. But inside, I was unraveling. Not from fear. From the quiet relief that finally, I wasn't just a voice in a vacuum. They heard me. And this time they listened. After the Situation Room cleared out, a woman in a gray suit approached me quietly. "Ma'am, we've arranged a private hotel room for your rest. You'll be under protective detail until the briefing is complete." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. They took me through a service elevator and out a side exit, away from the press crowd already forming outside the Pentagon gates. In the back seat of the black SUV, I stared out at the DC skyline. Everything looked sharp, alive, but part of me was still numb. At the hotel, I stripped off the uniform and folded it carefully. Then I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, not bothering to pull the sheets over me. My brain was still running diagnostics. I almost missed the knock at the door, just as the television in the corner clicked on. It was the White House press briefing. I sat up. The press secretary stepped aside, and the president himself took the podium. He looked older than I remembered, paler, but his voice was calm. "Tonight, the United States narrowly avoided a catastrophic breach of our national defense infrastructure." Cameras flashed. He continued. "This breach would have compromised power grids, communications, and missile command systems. But it was stopped because of a woman who acted with extraordinary clarity, courage, and skill." Then came the clip. My voice. From that night in Germany. The words played exactly as I remembered them, echoing across national television. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see it. but my family did. Back home, hundreds of miles away, that same broadcast lit up the TV above the fireplace where I had stood just hours earlier. Quiet and invisible. I imagined them all frozen, mouths slightly open, wine glasses forgotten in their hands. Then the screen cut to my photo. Full uniform, nameplate gleaming, eyes forward. My mother must have gasped. My father probably dropped his drink. And Mason? I hoped he remembered what he'd said about my keyboard job. The president's voice returned. We owe this woman a debt. And for the first time in my life, they saw me, not just as their daughter, but as someone who mattered. The phone started ringing almost immediately. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, and again, until finally the voicemail alert lit up. I played the first one. Claire, my sister. Her voice was broken. Tess. Oh my God, we saw the press conference. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? She started crying. I canceled dinner on you. I said you weren't important enough. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I let it end without responding. The next one was my dad. He cleared his throat, and for the first time in my life, I heard hesitation in his voice. Tessa, it's your father. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. You saved the country, and we were busy making jokes about your salary. I failed you as a father. I turned the phone over and let it drop to the carpet. From the hotel balcony, I looked down at the flashing lights. News vans crowded the sidewalk like vultures. I saw reporters holding up my photo to the doormen, shouting questions. Inside, my inbox was flooding. Messages from old classmates, teachers, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. Even some distant relatives who'd once called me antisocial were now tagging me on Facebook posts. Our niece, the national hero. Always knew she'd do something great. No, they didn't. They just hadn't seen me until someone else put a spotlight on me. Then my encrypted work line buzzed. It was a message from one of my old teammates. You were right. We saw it. You're a damn legend, Monroe. Delaney. That one made me smile. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel hollow when I read someone's words. I stared out across D.C., alive with lights and noise, and felt something deeper than pride. Peace. I had done the right thing. I had stayed silent when it was required, and I had spoken when it mattered. The knock at the door was gentle. A staff aide stood outside. Ma'am, the president's chief of staff is on the line. He'd like to extend an invitation to meet tomorrow morning. I nodded. Tell him I'll be there. Then I shut the door slowly, turned back to the window and whispered into the dark. You wanted me to be proud of something, Mom. You just didn't know. I already was. The next morning, I stood inside the East Room of the White House, sunlight streaming through tall windows, cameras already in place. My dress uniform was freshly pressed. My boots shined. But it wasn't the clothes that felt different. It was me. Staffers moved quickly, murmuring instructions and testing audio. The air smelled like fresh flowers and leather-bound folders. And nerves. The president entered to a standing ovation. Reporters, aides, and military leaders rose as one. I stood still, heart steady. He approached the podium and looked out across the room. Yesterday, we came within hours of a devastating cyber attack, one that could have crippled our defenses and endangered millions of lives. A hush fell. He paused, then continued. It was prevented not by a battalion, not by a strike team, but by one voice. A voice recorded 2 years ago, and a woman who refused to let that voice go unheard. The clip played once more. My voice filled the East Room. If you're hearing this, then we're out of time. Isolate the packet header, trace through auxiliary feeds. Don't look for the weapon, they already launched it. Find the signal. When the clip ended, he turned toward me. Tessa Monroe, for extraordinary service in defense of this nation, through courage, intellect, and unwavering resolve, it is my honor to present you with the Medal of National Valor. He pinned it to my chest himself. The room exploded in applause. I blinked hard to keep the tears in. He leaned in and said quietly, You never needed a bigger voice, just the right moment. I stepped up to the microphone. The room stilled again. I looked out and saw my mother in the front row. Her eyes were red. Her hands clutched the sides of her seat. My father sat beside her, shoulders hunched, face pale. I took a breath. For years, I was told I wasn't enough, I said. That what I did didn't matter because it wasn't loud. That quiet work behind a screen wasn't worthy of pride. That being invisible meant being small. I paused. But I've learned something else. I looked out over the crowd. Quiet does not mean powerless, and invisible does not mean unworthy. The room rose to its feet. Later that evening, I returned to the base memorial wall. Still in uniform, still alone. I knelt at Delgado's name, fingers brushing the etched letters. "We did it," I whispered. And for the first time, I let myself cry. Not because I was broken, but because I was whole.